Hello, my friends. Welcome back to Royal Shadows English. I am truly happy that you are here with me today. Take a slow, deep breath. Let your shoulders soften and allow this story to guide you to a quiet room in a country house in England where a woman, writing in secrecy, transformed literature forever. Now picture a small sitting room. The walls are painted a soft cream. There's a fireplace, 2 armchairs, and a window that looks out over green fields and hedges. The year is around 1810. A woman sits at a small wooden table near the window. She is in her mid-30s. She has brown, curly hair pinned up in a simple style. She wears a plain white dress. She is not beautiful in the way paintings often present beauty, but her eyes are keen and bright, the eyes of someone who observes everything. She is writing. Her pen moves swiftly across a small sheet of paper. She writes in a neat, tiny script, letters pressed close together to save paper, because paper costs a great deal. On the page, 2 characters are in disagreement. A proud man is declaring his love to a woman. The woman refuses him. She is angry. She is magnificent. Then a sound, a creak from the door. Someone is approaching. The woman does not panic. She calmly lifts a large piece of blotting paper and lays it over her writing. By the time the door opens, she is sitting quietly, appearing as though she has been doing nothing at all. A servant passes through the room. The woman smiles politely. The servant leaves. The woman removes the blotting paper and begins to write again. She has asked her family not to repair that creaking door. She needs the warning. Her name was Jane Austen. She was writing in secret, and the book beneath that blotting paper would become one of the most famous novels ever written. It was called Pride and Prejudice. Stay with me, because this is a story about a woman who never married, never became widely known during her lifetime, and never placed her real name on a single book she published. And yet she created love stories that the entire world still reads 200 years later. Jane Austen was born on the 16th of December, 1775, in a small village called Steventon in the county of Hampshire in the south of England. It was the sort of place where very little seemed to happen. Green fields, stone churches, country lanes bordered by tall hedges, families who had lived in the same houses for generations. Her father, George Austen, was the local clergyman, the man who led church services on Sundays. He was a kind, thoughtful man who loved books. Her mother, Cassandra, came from a slightly higher social class and possessed a sharp sense of humor. Jane was the 7th of 8 children, 6 boys and 2 girls. The house was crowded. It was noisy. There was never quite enough money, but there were books. Her father owned a library of more than 500 volumes, a large collection for a country clergyman. Jane was free to read anything she wished. She read novels, poetry, history, and plays. She read the heavy dramatic novels that were popular in her era, stories filled with fainting heroines, kidnappings, and unlikely coincidences. She read them and she found them absurd. By the time she was 12 years old, Jane had begun writing her own stories. Not serious, careful tales, but wild, humorous, mocking ones. She composed parodies of the novels she had read, exaggerated versions that poked fun at every convention. She wrote short plays and brief novels and presented them to her family as gifts. Her family read them aloud in the evenings and laughed until they cried. At 12, most children are learning how the world functions. Jane Austen was already laughing at it. Her closest companion was her older sister, also named Cassandra. The two were inseparable. They shared a bedroom for much of their lives. They wrote each other letters whenever they were apart. Long, detailed, witty letters about the people around them, the dances they attended, the ridiculous remarks their neighbors made. Cassandra was the only person who knew everything about Jane. She was her first reader, her dearest friend, and her protector. As Jane grew into a young woman, she lived the life that most women of her time experienced. She attended dances, she visited neighbors, she walked through the countryside, she sewed, she played the piano, she waited. In her era, a woman's future depended almost entirely on one thing: marriage. A woman could not own property independently. She could not earn a living in any socially accepted way. She could not attend university. If she did not marry, she would rely on her father or her brothers for a roof over her head and food on her table. Marriage was not only about love, it was survival, and the stronger the marriage, the safer the life. Jane understood this completely. She understood it so deeply that she wrote about it better than anyone before or since. In December of 1795, Jane met a young man at a dance. His name was Tom Lefroy. He was Irish, studying law in London and visiting relatives in the neighborhood for the Christmas season. He was young, intelligent, and charming. He had read the same books Jane had read. He could match her wit with his own. Jane was 20 years old and full of energy. They danced together that evening and continued dancing. Over the next few weeks, they met again and again at parties and gatherings throughout the neighborhood. People began to talk. They noticed how often the two were together, how close they stood, how easily they laughed. Jane wrote to Cassandra about him. She described his white coat. She joked about how much they had danced together. Almost too much, she wrote, as if trying to make it seem smaller than it truly was. Her words were playful, but beneath the playfulness, something real was unfolding. Jane was falling in love, and Tom, it seems, was falling as well. But there was a problem. The same problem that fills every Jane Austen novel: money. Tom Lefroy had no fortune of his own. His career depended on a wealthy great-uncle who was paying for his education. If Tom married a poor clergyman's daughter, a young woman with no inheritance, his great-uncle would withdraw his support, and his career would be finished. Jane had no money either. She had nothing to offer except her mind. Tom's family recognized the risk. They sent him away. He returned to Ireland. He and Jane never met again. Many years later, when Tom Lefroy was a very old man, the Lord Chief Justice of Ireland, wealthy and influential, he admitted to a nephew that he had once been in love with Jane Austen. But he described it as a boy's love, just a boy's love, as though a few weeks of dancing meant nothing. But for Jane, I believe it meant everything. She never married. She received at least one proposal from a wealthy man named Harris Big Wither, a family friend. She accepted one evening. She lay awake throughout the night, and the next morning she changed her mind and refused. She chose poverty over a marriage without love. She chose herself, and she did something remarkable with that decision. She took everything she had felt, the thrill of the dance, the pain of parting, the impossible distance between love and money, and she poured it into her writing. The tension between what the heart desires and what the world permits runs through every novel she ever wrote. She had lived it. She knew precisely how it felt. Jane wrote her first novel in her early 20s. She called it Eleanor and Marianne. She revised it. She reshaped it. Years later, it would be published under a new title, Sense and Sensibility. She wrote another novel titled First Impressions. That became Pride and Prejudice. But being published was not simple. Her father attempted to sell First Impressions to a publisher in London in 1797. The publisher rejected it without even reading it. Think about that. The most beloved novel in the English language was declined without being opened. Jane did not surrender. She continued writing. She continued revising. And in 1811, when she was 35 years old, Sense and Sensibility was finally published. The author's name on the cover was not Jane Austen. It stated simply, "By a lady." By a lady. 3 words meaning, a woman wrote this. But you do not need to know her name. In 1811, a woman who published novels risked being judged as improper, as lacking refinement, as someone who had stepped beyond her expected place. Jane chose to remain unseen. She allowed the words to speak on their own. The book achieved a quiet success. Critics praised it, readers enjoyed it. Jane earned about £140, a modest amount, but her own money. For the first time in her life, she had earned something that belonged to her. In 1813, Pride and Prejudice was published. It was an immediate success. People adored it. One reviewer described it as far superior to almost all the publications of the kind which had recently appeared before the public. Readers spoke of Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy as though they were real individuals. The book sold out its first printing quickly. Even the Prince Regent, the future King George IV, kept a set of her novels in each of his homes. But still, no one outside her family knew who the lady was. Jane once attended a dinner party where a guest praised Pride and Prejudice at length, unaware that the author was seated across the table, smiling quietly, saying nothing. Can you imagine remaining silent while someone praises your greatest work directly to you and you cannot reveal yourself? Jane published 4 novels during her lifetime: Sense and Sensibility, Pride and Prejudice, Mansfield Park, and Emma. 2 more, Northanger Abbey and Persuasion, would appear after her death. In each one, she wrote about ordinary life with extraordinary clarity. She wrote about families, about money, about manners, about the small decisions that shape a life. She did not write about wars or kings or grand adventures. She wrote about drawing rooms and dances and the things people say when they mean the opposite. She wrote sentences so perfectly balanced that they seem simple until you read them again and realize they contain an entire world. She could reveal a person's character in a single line of dialogue. She could make you laugh, and then a page later make you feel something so honest that it aches. And that was her genius. She made the ordinary feel significant. She showed that a conversation at a dinner table could be as dramatic as a battlefield. She demonstrated that a woman's mind, a woman's choices, and a woman's feelings were worthy of the most serious literature. In early 1816, something shifted. Jane began to feel unwell. She was tired. Her back ached. She felt weak in ways she could not explain. She continued writing. She was working on a new novel called Persuasion, a story about a woman who receives a second chance at love. It is the most tender of all her books, as though she sensed that time was limited. By the spring of 1817, she could no longer hold a pen for long. She began one final novel called Sanditon, but had to stop after only a few chapters. Her handwriting, once so neat and precise, became unsteady and uneven. In May, her family took her to the city of Winchester, hoping that doctors there might help. They could not. On the 18th of July, 1817, Jane Austen died in her sister Cassandra's arms. She was 41 years old. The cause of her death is still discussed. Some historians believe it was a disease of the kidneys. Others think it may have been a form of cancer. Cassandra wrote a letter to their niece after Jane passed away. She said, "She was the sun of my life, the brightener of every pleasure, the comforter of every sorrow. I had not a thought hidden from her, and it is as if I have lost a part of myself." Jane was buried in Winchester Cathedral. The stone marking her grave says nothing about her writing. It praises her faith, her kindness, and her character. It was as though the world still did not know, or did not yet care, that one of the greatest writers in the English language rested beneath that stone. But the world would come to know. After her death, her brother Henry published her remaining novels and finally revealed her name. For many years, she was considered a minor novelist, pleasant but light. Then, gradually, readers and scholars began to understand what she had truly accomplished. She had not written simple love stories. She had created flawless portraits of human nature. She had captured vanity, pride, self-deception, and kindness with a precision no one has ever equaled. Today, Jane Austen is one of the most celebrated writers in the English language. Her novels have been translated into every major language in the world. Pride and Prejudice has been adapted into films, television series, and stage productions many times. Her face appears in the British 10-pound note. The house where she lived in Hampshire is a museum visited by people from every corner of the globe. She has millions of devoted readers who call themselves Janeites. And here is the beautiful irony at the heart of it all. The woman who understood love better than almost anyone who wrote the most famous love stories in the English language never experienced the lasting love she described. She danced with Tom Lefroy on a winter evening, and then he was gone. She refused a wealthy man she did not love and spent the remainder of her life in her sister's company at a small writing desk, creating the romances she would never live. And so, my friend, the story of the woman who wrote in secret gently reaches its end. Jane Austen had no power, she had no wealth, she had no private room of her own. She wrote in a busy sitting room, covering her papers whenever someone passed by. She published without her name. She lived and died in near obscurity. But the words she placed on those small sheets of paper refused to remain hidden. They outlived her silence. They outlived the world that tried to keep her small. And you, my friend, are doing something Jane would understand. You are learning to express what you feel in a language that is not yet completely yours. Some days the words arrive easily. Some days they hide from you the way Jane hid her pages beneath blotting paper. But you continue. You keep searching for the right word, the right sentence, the right way to be understood. Jane once wrote through her most beloved character, Elizabeth Bennet, "I am only resolved to act in that manner which will constitute my own happiness." She chose her own path. You are choosing yours. Keep writing your story. Keep speaking. Keep learning. This is Royal Shadows English. Tell me, my friend, which part of Jane's story remained with you? Was it the creaking door, the winter dance with Tom Lefroy? Or the woman who sat in silence while strangers praised her book? Leave a comment below. I am always eager to hear from you. There are many more stories waiting right here, and I will be here when you return. Until next time, take care of yourself and never stop learning.